corner
Okay.
of your PowerPoint.
Okay. Let's see. This mentioned just offhand, Gordie Howe actually spent a good.
You're good now. You're good now.
Okay, thank you. Just as an aside, but still pertinent to the WHA, Gordie Howe spent a good share of time in his final years in actually Lubbock, Texas, a small city. And apparently a daughter who was here, and there were people in town who'd say, like, was that Gordie Howe? I personally did not see him. Anyway, but there's a little Lubbock, Texas connection. So my talk is about the WHA's Los Angeles Sharks. In a way, we're going from one of the most illustrious WHA teams, the Nordique, to one of the least illustrious teams, the LA Sharks. They only lasted for 2 years. Before I move on, you can see my LA Sharks puck. One day when we had ice, I just put it out on the ice and took a picture. I just want to acknowledge the hockey database, that hockeydb.com, that a lot of the information I'm using comes from there. So the Sharks started out with, as did the league as a whole, in the fall of 1972. The opening game, which is referenced in this Los Angeles Times article, was October 13, 1972, which I attended as a 10-year-old kid. And this is something I did not remember from the time, but this is something I only learned about when doing research for this presentation, about how the Sharks were known for roughness. In fact, it started out in the preseason. A couple of the other teams that played against the Sharks in preseason games started complaining to the league that the Sharks were a dirty team. And so then the complaint went to, I have a little arrow you can see down to the bottom, to Vern Buffy, the head of officials for the WHA. And he was, of course, a famous NHL official and even wrote a book about being a referee, entitled Black and White and Never Right. So another famous person associated with the WHA. The team played at the Los Angeles Sports Arena, which existed from 1959 to 2016, the home of the Sharks. Those of you who are familiar with Los Angeles would know the LA Coliseum, with famous football and also Olympic Stadium. So the sports arena, to me, like the top of it looked like the lid of a tube of toothpaste. So it's like the tube of toothpaste next to the Coliseum. It's also near University of Southern California, south of downtown. The sports arena lasted until 2016, and then it was torn down to make room for a new MLS, Major League Soccer stadium. Now, the sports arena was only 8 years older than the Forum, which was the home of the Kings. The Forum opened in 1967. And I've been to both venues growing up in Los Angeles. My family was heavily into sports. And even though there was only an 8-year difference, I thought that the sports arena was just much more dilapidated. It was just nowhere near as nice or well-maintained as the Forum. The Forum, by the way, still exists. That the Kings and Lakers moved to the Staples Center. Some of you may know, some of you may not know. They refurbished the Forum into a concert venue. The Forum had the Los Angeles Forum, not Montreal Forum. The Los Angeles Forum, where the Kings played, still is around. Again, this is going back to the hockey database. These are a list of the members of the first LA Sharks team in 1972-73, of those players who played 70 or more games. So it's basically their core. They had several other players who played fewer games. You may recognize some of the names. The Jim Watson, who's the sixth name down, is not the one who was on the Philadelphia Flyers. That there's a different Jim Watson. Just want to make clear about that. Underneath the roster, it's kind of small, but you could see other 1972-73 players and how many games. Alton White, 57. Mike Byers, a former member of the Kings, played 56 games for the Sharks. George Gardner, the goalie, 49. and so forth. And then underneath that, you can see new faces in 73, 74, the second and final year of the LA Sharks. The big name person, Mark Tardif, who was mentioned in the presentation. He was age 24. He had played the three previous full seasons and part of a fourth season with the Montreal Canadiens, and then later to play with both the pre and post-merger Quebec Nordique. The only other player I could find who had substantial NHL experience on the 73-74 team was Ron Ward, who was a member of the 71-72 Canucks when the Canucks were a new team. I don't remember if the Canucks came in 70 or 71, but the Canucks were pretty new. This is my contribution to modern art. It's actually not as complex as it may look. Across the top are ages, so like age 17, age 18, like the lifespan. And then we have the players who played 70 or more games. And it's basically for each of these players, Ralph McSwain, Jim Nykamp, Jerry Odrowski, and so forth. At each age, you can see at what level of hockey they were playing. So at the bottom, I have the legend. So light blue is minor leagues. And I admit, I don't have the sophistication to know if someone was playing at a very good minor league level or very low. I'm not distinguishing like high minor league versus low, but just minor league in general. Orangish yellow is NHL. And you'll see that, of course, a lot of times somebody does not play an entire season at one level, right? They might play 60 games in the NHL and 20 in the minors. So you get a lot of blended boxes. So McSwain at age 25, you can see it's mostly light blue. He played mostly in the minors with a little bit in the NHL. I tried to make a distinction. I didn't want to have the same symbolism for somebody who played 2 NHL games versus somebody who played like 60. Red means you are on the LA Sharks. So solid red, LA Sharks. Red with the white stripes is other WHA teams. So red, either way, if you see red, it's WHA. Solid red is with the Sharks. Red with the stripes is a different WHA team. So what do we conclude from this? And I'll be happy to discuss this and see what people put in the comments. In the first talk, it was saying that the Nordique, would possibly have been considered an NHL caliber team. I think the Sharks would not. You don't see a lot of orange, meaning NHL experienced players. Sort of have a mixture. You see some players who are on the Sharks in their early 20s. Slater, who I'm assuming was the son of the coach, Terry Slater. Service, Gilmore, the young players who are, again, whose red boxes are in their early 20s were not NHL players. You have some mid-career, ages 26, 27, 28. Some of them had a little NHL experience. And then you have some of the players who were by professional athlete standards pretty old when they were playing for the Sharks. Now, depending on how you have people's video faces displayed, it might be blocking out the far right-hand side where it's age 34 and 35. At least on my screen, all of your pictures are blocking out. But I'll say Jerry Odrowski played for the Sharks when he was 34 and 35. And then that asterisk below, he played 2 more years with other WHA teams at ages 36 and 37. Ted McCaskill, very interesting case history. He joined the Sharks in their first year, and within a week or two was his 36th birthday. So he played with the Sharks at 36 and 37 years of age, and then he played minor league hockey. So I don't know. To me, it seems the younger players clearly were not NHL caliber. You had a few players, Odrowski had some earlier NHL experience. Watson had a little bit of earlier NHL experience. JP LeBlanc, he was kind of a rarity where he had the bulk of his NHL experience after being with the Sharks. Heiskala, Jura, Crashly, you see a few players with orange boxes. But on the whole, I would say these were largely journeymen, maybe had brief stints in the NHL. And I just want, again, I was just fascinated by Ted McCaskill. There's so many amazing things about him. His son, Kirk McCaskill, was a Major League Baseball pitcher. I don't know how many hockey players have sons or daughters, for that matter, who were professionals in other sports. But Ted McCaskill's son, Kirk McCaskill, was a Major League Baseball pitcher for the Angels and White Sox. I counted up that he laced up the skates for at least 872 games. We don't know for sure because his 1961-62 statistics are not available. So you have to assume he's probably played over 900 professional games, all to make it to 4 NHL games in 1967-68. So, you know, the love of the game, that playing 900 plus games for 4 in the NHL. Just a little aside. Some of the statistics from the team. The first year, 72, 73, I'm sure that this was very small looking. I'm happy to send anybody the PowerPoint. You can just email me. Just look up my name, Alan Reifman. I'm at Texas Tech University, and you'll get my email. Or I could put it into the chat box as well. The Sharks finished 3rd in the Western Division. They lost to Houston in the first round. Sure enough, as I've highlighted in that little red box, 1,477 penalty minutes. Sure enough, true to their reputation that they established in the preseason, they indeed led the WHA in penalty minutes, and by a pretty wide margin. And I don't know how well you can see it, may be very small, but there are a couple teams whose penalty minutes were in the 1,300s or so, but there were teams whose penalty minutes were like in the 700s, 800s. So 1,477 minutes, that's a lot of time in the box. The next season underneath it, which is 73, 74, down at the bottom, you can see the Sharks were dead last. And that was their history. They then were moved to Detroit the next year to become the Michigan Stags, also ill-fated. I think they lasted half a season. And then my understanding is the WHA had wanted to try a team in Baltimore, Maryland, and the Stags, I guess, were, pardon the pun, staggering in a bad way. And so they moved the Stags to Baltimore and didn't last much longer there. Attendance, the team was 4th in the league in attendance the first year, 72, 73, about 6,000 fans per game, and it dropped to about 5,300 the next year. So the on-ice product was declining, the attendance was declining. A comparison with the Kings, this is a needlepoint cushion. I actually have it right here off my LA Sharks puck. In my makeshift LA Sharks jersey. I commissioned my mother, who is now still around at age 81. I commissioned my mother, who did needlepoint. It's like you get a grid and you run a needle with yarn through it and it makes a nice picture. To do a combined LA Kings, LA Sharks cushion. To my knowledge, this is the only one in existence. One might ask, what was the problem the Sharks had that was it that the Kings were doing especially well? Indeed, the Kings' attendance rose sharply the 2 years the Sharks played. So the first few years when the Kings came on as one of the 1967 expansion teams at the Forum, they were getting about 8,000. And then when the Sharks came along in 72 and 73, the Kings you're starting to get about 11,000. So I don't think there's any cause and effect, or, maybe the people in Los Angeles saw the poor hockey of the Sharks and said, oh, we really have to go to see the Kings. I don't know. And you can see also right underneath that, the Kings were improving on the ice. In the 72-73 season, the Kings had 73 points, and they had 78 points in 73-74. They made the playoffs. The 3 years before the Sharks, the Kings were between 38 and 63 points. And then all I have is I'd opened up with that little newspaper headline about the Sharks' rough play. And if anyone wanted to read the full article in all its glory about all the Sharks players, I scanned that. And if anybody requests the PowerPoint, you can immerse yourself in as much detail. But I was at that first home game in 1972. My birthday's October 8th, and the game was October 13th. And that is that for the LA Sharks.
Thanks very much, Alan. A couple of questions came through, or comments. The chat box was busy with a lot of input that we keep one pretty busy. One question came up is from Justin. He asked, is Bob Perez a cousin of Gilbert Perez?
I think members of our audience would know that better than I would. I honestly.
Okay.
I don't know. Does anybody know? Anybody?
Somebody knows on mute and comment on it?
I think it's spelled differently, isn't it?
Aubry thinks it may have been spelled a little differently.
Oh.
He's checking. We got Aubry checking. And
okay.
An interesting comment from Benoit. He talked about the LA Stars of the ABA inflating the attendance a bit. Was there any suspicions that the attendance numbers for the Sharks were being inflated a bit?
And I wouldn't know, but it's true. The ABA for basketball and the WHA for hockey were pretty concurrent with each other. I guess the ABA started in the late 60s. They had a few years head start, but the LA Stars played at the sports arena, as did the Sharks, and then the basketball Stars then moved to Salt Lake City, I think, and they became the Utah Stars. I noticed, somebody asked me where I lived in Buffalo. From 1991 to 97, I lived in Amherst near the Boulevard Mall near Niagara Falls Boulevard.
I can add, this is Jack Stanfield again, I can add a little bit. I played in LA at the sports arena with the LA Blades in the Western Hockey League in 66, 67. I was there for the whole year, and hockey was pretty popular there in that building, and it drew pretty well. And the guy who owned the Sharks was the guy who started the WHA, I think, or one of the owners of that team, was one of the guys that started the WHA. And the playoff game that you referenced, where they got beat in the first season by Houston, I scored the winning goal in that game. It was a tipped shot from the point that went in the top right corner. I'll never forget it, and put us in the next round of the playoffs. So there's a little bit of perspective there.
Good, thanks very much. Just great. We've had some feedback. Yes, those two, Bob and Gilbert Perez were cousins. I've had you probably see in the chat box that people are confirming it. So good job here. Good job.
Thank you.
Another question has come up. Who played goal for the Sharks?
Well, George Gardner was the main, and then also Russ Gillow. I think Gardner may have had NHL experience. I don't think Gillo did.
Okay.
Overall, I'm just going to plug in for the SIHR database. The hockey database is great. The fellow that mentions it is a SIHR member, but if you look at Ted McCaskill's record in the SIHR database, all of the seasons are recorded. And so he put a total of 971 games, Alan. That's in junior and pro hockey. 967 points, but he had an amazing 1,801 penalty minutes.
Yeah, he was a tough hockey player and was really kind of the leader of that team.
Thank you much, Aubry. Well, I guess we can try out that reaction button now. Everybody want to try out the reaction button? You can see we can now thank and clap for Ellen. A fascinating link back into the past.
Thank you.
Can you hear the clapping and the thumbs up?
I'm